Rabbi Abby Jacobson is here today to lead us in our invocation, after which I'll ask Councilman Larry McEltee to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Would everyone please stand?
Thank you, Vice Mayor, and thank you, City Councilors and fellow citizens. I speak out of my own tradition, and in my own tradition, we are counting the clock down to the holiday of Passover. 25 short days from now, every Jew in the world will have to have every crumb of grain out of our houses, swept out from under the couch, inconveniently under the car seat, behind the refrigerator will have to be scrubbed, our houses will have to be re-koshered, the dishes changed out and everything for Passover. And so the holiday of Passover and the Exodus from Egypt is something which we are living in a very physical and real way now. So it's from this position that I speak. With your indulgence, it has come to my attention in interfaith settings that Jews do not say, let us pray before we pray. We just sort of start praying. And so people tend to get realize that I'm praying about halfway through. So I'm about to start my prayer. We usually start with, may it be your will, and that's people's cue. But anyway. May it be your will, Lord our God and God of our ancestors, as we trek toward the holiday of Passover, a holiday on which you saved not just Jews, but all needy people from slavery and delivered them the much needed freedom that every human being deserves, and for which all peoples cry out at one time or another. May you help us to sweep not only the crumbs of bread, but the crumbs of doubt and of hate and of discomfort and of anger out of the corners of our souls, just as we sweep the crumbs of bread out of the corners of our cabinets. May you help us defeat whichever Pharaoh it is in our lives right now, whether it be hunger or loss of job, whether it be strife with a neighbor or difficulty with a family. May you help us identify the Pharaoh in our lives. And in 25 days from now, may you help us be freed, not only symbolically from the Pharaoh of the past, but also the Pharaoh who plagues us today, so that we may come out of our own symbolic Egypt and our own symbolic slavery to better serve you, to better be members of our community, of our state, and of our country, and to be better fellow human beings. Amen.
Face the flag. Salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This morning, from the Office of the Mayor, we have a presentation by Roy Williams, who is President and CEO of the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber. Roy comes to speak to us about once a quarter to update us on happenings at the Chamber, and we look forward to that as always. Roy, thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you. Madam Vice Mayor, members of the Council, Mr. City Manager, thank you again for inviting me back. I appreciate the opportunity to share a few highlights kind of what's going on as we see it from our perspective. And they're kind of random, so they don't really follow any kind of sequence, and I'd certainly be happy to answer any questions should you have any. The other good part about that is I'll be extremely brief. One of the areas that the Chamber is very active in right now is the what we sort of refer to as the arts and entertainment employment, and the film, music, and interactive industries are a real growth industry in our marketplace. As a result of that, we are partnering with the state, and we have over a number of years, to participate in the South by Southwest show that's taking place or getting ready to take place in Austin. We're participating in that trade show. We will be a part of the state of Oklahoma's what they refer to as the Buffalo Lounge, which is a performance space on 6th Street, to not only showcase our existing creative industries, but also to show them what is going on in our particular marketplace. And just as a side note, the business journals recently recognized Oklahoma City in the top 10% of all metros for arts and entertainment employment. We now have in excess of 8,000 employees in that particular sector, and we would like to see that continue to grow. As all of you know, switching gears, our legislature is in session. We're very actively working with them. We're actively working on some issues that are relevant to the city. We're trying to continue to protect the business climate that we hold in high esteem here and to try to protect our competitive advantages. And as I mentioned, we are working on some very important issues that pertain to Bricktown, to the Academy of Contemporary Music, to liquor laws, things like that. So be happy to share additional information with you on that. Continuing on with yet something different, every year, as all of you know, because some of you have participated, we do a fly-in to Washington, D.C. We will be doing that in late June, specifically June 27th and 28th, where we take a number of community and business leaders to D.C. to do a couple things. One, it's an opportunity to meet with each and every one individually of our congressional delegation, both our U.S. senators, our 5 Congress members, and then also to have a dialogue with areas that are important to us. We tend to go to the Pentagon and spend a half a day there meeting with defense people, but this year we will also meet with transportation people, economic development people, and because of all of our interest in what's going on with the federal budget as it pertains to the FAA, to Tinker, et cetera, we want to get as much insight as we can. Today is also another important day for us. It begins our second program called OKC Connect. I'm not sure how many of you know about this program, but last year we kicked it off, and it's an intentional effort on our part to connect new-to-market corporate executives with our community. We are partnering with Leadership Oklahoma City to conduct this, and this is basically an orientation program to connect people who have been recruited here by both the public and the private sector, and to quickly connect them with what's going on in this community in the attempt to retain them and retain that talent. We kick off this morning with a class of 47. We will probably have 4 of these classes this particular year. Most of you are aware that we do inter-city visits, but there are more cities that come to us than what we go to them. And in fact, in the fall of this year, we will have Louisville, Kentucky, Mobile, Alabama, and Columbus, Georgia, all planning very large delegations coming here. So I want to thank you in advance, because we will be asking a number of you to help us out in educating and orienting these groups as to what's going on in Oklahoma City. Another initiative that we've been doing for a number of years in partnership with the city is work at the ICSC, the International Conference for Retail Sales, and we will be doing that again this year. We will be exhibiting as we have done in previous years, and right now we're preparing marketing and sales data to take there. There will be a number of other people from our market as well, primarily development people, people who recruit retailers, et cetera. So the International Council is a great forum for doing that. And I believe we're seeing some success in that, because I think, as you well know, city sales tax continue to increase at a really good rate. And I think that's a window of opportunity that we really want to take advantage of, and so we're going to do that. A little bit about visitor impact. The U.S. Travel just released their economic input data from last year, actually 2010, that fiscal year. Economic impact of travel just in Oklahoma County now has surpassed $2 billion annually. It's about $2.1 billion. So this really reinforces to us the importance of this industry as an employer and as a growth industry in our sector. And speaking of economic development, a couple things on business retention and expansion. The first 2 months of this year, January and February, we've worked with 25 different companies in expansion projects, amounting to just under 600 new jobs. Our recruiting activity still is very strong. We're working now with 27 new prospects that we've developed this particular year. 5 have actually been on the ground here that we've hosted and interacted with. And we're continuing to see a lot of that activity come from California, which is where it has historically come from. Just a couple other things, too, in that industry. As you know, the recent announcements in aviation aerospace as it related to Tinker were not really good news for us. We continue to stay on top of that. We actually met with General Litchfield yesterday to better understand what that impact might be on Tinker, and also what future things may be coming down the line. As well, we've been engaged with Federal Aviation Administration to see potentially what is in the future for them as well. I'll conclude by mentioning a couple of accolades that our area has recently received. We were just named in the top 10 metros for manufacturing job growth, up 5.2% over last year. We were in the top 3 for retail job growth. We were number 7 for private sector job growth. Again, these are nationally. And we were named as one of the top 13 cities bouncing back from the recession ahead of all the other metros. And the final happy note I will leave you with is we were named as the 3rd happiest city for work in the United States. So I'll conclude with that, Madam Vice Mayor, and be happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful, Roy. Thank you. Does anybody have any comments or questions for Roy?
So be happy.
Be happy. Yes, Ed.
We'll just try and plant a bug in your ear. I don't know if you've read the outstanding series of articles in the Oklahoman this week on addiction and the impact, the $7.2 billion impact to our state's economy, to production. It's referred to as a cancer that's just eating away at our city and our state. If I could just, again, plant the bug in your ear. We don't, in this city or state, have long-term treatment, a long-term treatment center for addiction. And I think that's a glaring, something we need. And people have tried to get that sector of healthcare built. The 2 impediments are generally that neighborhoods don't want it in their neighborhood, and then it's just hard to make the economics work. The literature is clear that for success to turn this around, you need long-term comprehensive treatment facilities, and we just don't have that in Oklahoma. So anyone in Oklahoma who needs that kind of treatment has got to go to Texas or Kansas or Louisiana, and it's just a glaring deficiency in our healthcare system in Oklahoma. And so if we're going to look at incentives for economic development to try and make something happen that wouldn't ordinarily have happened, I just asked maybe that the Chamber could look at that sector of our healthcare. I know that there's lots of private citizens who would contribute, I believe, but I think we might need some kind of public-private partnership to get the numbers to work.
Okay. We'll be happy to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else, any comments or questions for Roy? Well, I just really want to compliment you on your focus on the arts and employment in the arts at this important time. We're going through the Allied Arts campaign, but it's not just about quality of life, but it truly is about economic development issues. And so
we actually had a chamber campaign yesterday and had Allied Arts present to all of our employees, so that's one of our charities that our staff supports significantly.
Great. And I think that Oklahoma, I'm sorry. Yes, Pat.
Roy, do you know what the criteria were included in that making us the happiest city, one of the happiest cities?
No, but I'll be happy to find out.
I was curious. I maybe missed one of these sometime ago.
Could have been the council's engagement,
Thank you very much, Roy. We really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today. Item 4 on the agenda is the Journal of Council Proceedings. Item A is to receive the Journal for March 6 of 2012 and to approve the Journal of Council Proceedings for February 28th of 2012. Second? Rob, cast your votes, please. Oops, sorry. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And on to item 5, that is our request for uncontested continuances. We have 2 published on the agenda, item 8B and item 8C. But City Manager, do we have some others?
We do. On page, I think it's page 5, item 6L needs to be stricken. We're going to bring that back in a couple of weeks. There's some errors in that item, and so that will be brought back. That's 6L. And then under dilapidated on page 15, under item 8H1B, 2304 North Everest, request that be stricken, the owner is secured. Item C, 2308 North Everest, we ask that be stricken, the owner is secured. Item D, 1814 North Jordan, we ask that be stricken, need to re-notify. Item K, 416 Southwest 12th Street, we ask that be stricken, the owner has secured. Item P, 1136 Northeast 18th Street, we ask that be stricken, the owner has secured. Item R, 4332 Northwest 23rd Street, we ask that be stricken, the owner has secured. Item S, 1213 Southwest 26th Street, we ask that be stricken, the owner has secured. Item T, 1221 Southwest 26th Street. We ask that be stricken. The owner has secured. And finally, item X, 1301 Northwest 99th Street. We ask that that be stricken. Again, the owner has secured.
Thank you. Are there any other requests for uncontested continuances? Hearing none, we'll recess the council meeting and reconvene as the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority. We have 3 items. Second? Cast your votes, please. Thank you very much. Items passed unanimously. We will recess the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority, and we reconvene as the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority. We have one item here which is related to the presentation we had last week about the Centennial Sculpture, Centennial Land Run Monument.
Second.
Cast your votes, please. And that passes unanimously. We'll go ahead and adjourn the OCPPA and reconvene as the Oklahoma City Environmental Assistance Trust. We have one item. Second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. And we'll adjourn the OCEAT and reconvene the council meeting with the consent docket. Second. And are there individual considerations?
Item L. Oh, excuse me, N, excuse me.
Item N.
Your Honor, C, F3, and Y.
Anybody else? Pete, would you go ahead and get started then on item N?
Yes, it's a project to be advertised for bids for cleaning and maintenance of channels. And I'm wondering if the SHINE program couldn't do that, couldn't be, or at least have an opportunity to bid on it. Is it?
We'd be happy to check with
It's not necessary to change it if they could put a bid in on as it stands.
Yeah, it could be, this generally is heavy equipment cleaning and such, but let me check and see if it's something that he has equipment to do, or if it's something.
I'd just like to look at it because I think there ought to be some more opportunities out there, and one of the concerns that program has is how it's going to get funding. And if it could get funding by contracting for things like this, that might save both agencies some money. Okay.
We'd be happy to look into that.
Great, thank you, Pete. Pat, you had a CF3.
Just some minor questions, Your Honor. On C, it's a resolution authorizing a change in estimate on some materials that will purchase through a state contract. And we went from $30,000 to $2,030,000. And what process is in place, refresh my memory, that we can assure ourselves that the state contract is the best route for us to take, particularly on a project of this size of $2 million?
Craig?
Typically, we'll evaluate the state contract, the pricing on that contract, and look at other pricing that we see that's in the market to make a determination of whether we want to try to bid that or if we want to try to use the state contract.
And we decided after that evaluation not to bid this $2 million project.
Right. Like on this one, we had already been on the state contract.
Yeah.
And technically, this is one that we have authorization to use a state contract. The estimate that we put in of what we're going to use this year was based upon expectation that we'd just be doing regular replacements. There were actually 2 projects that we didn't realize were planned for this year at the time that we put that into place. We became aware of that later on, that were projects we were actually going to do full replacements of phone systems, not just a regular replacement as phones break down and all. And so this was a far higher cost than what we anticipated. We still have the authorization, but we wanted to bring it back to the council to let you know because our estimate before was so much lower. So we still have that authorization in this, and we believe this was the best pricing for us, but we wanted to bring it back to the council to make sure you were aware that it's more than what we had originally anticipated.
But even with the complete replacement of telephone systems, this is still the best deal?
That's our belief right now, yes.
Thank you. Your Honor, on F3,
F3, yes.
I thought we had adopted a moratorium against renaming streets. This seems to be a street renaming project.
We have a policy. This naming does not conform with that policy, and I believe it was recommended for denial by the Planning Commission. but the applicant still would like to bring it forward.
It said for final hearing and appropriate, even though it doesn't match our philosophies or policies, we're going to go ahead and hear it anyway.
Yes, that doesn't stop an applicant from bringing something forward.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have the report from staff on this?
Well, it will, but this is just the introduction. It'll be before council
I know.
coming forward. But I believe, Bob, that it was denied by the Planning Commission?
That's correct. We met with the applicant, advised him of the policy, showed him the policy, and they still wanted to proceed. We recommended against it, and the Planning Commission did as well.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
On why, just a curiosity kind of question, this is an application to the federal government for some help with our transportation issues. Do you have any idea when we might hear? I know there's a short time fuse on getting our application in.
I don't know. I don't know. Actually, this is interesting because we put in a grant application from a different source of money. It's for a similar project last week. We're trying to cover as many bases as possible on this. This project is actually part of Tiger 4, an application that's been turned down before, but we think we'd fix some of our discrepancies and bring it forward. Jane, do you know the time frame as to when we might hear back on that?
Yes, Jane Abraham in City Manager's Office. The application's due this week, or technically next week, but we're turning it in this week. We expect to hear back probably in June, I think is what they're aiming for. So they're trying to expedite the process and let us know sooner rather than
From
later.
March to June, that's lightning speed for the federal government. Good, thank you.
And Jane, did I understand that we'd made sort of a preliminary application for these funds and
Yes, we
vetted it
did.
slightly?
And we made the first hurdle. This is very similar to the application that we made for Tiger 3, but we've made modifications based on the feedback that we got from the Federal Highway Administration, or the Federal Transportation Department, in terms of they did a debriefing with us on our application and made suggestions to make it stronger. So,
Great. But at the end of the day, I think I read that only 15% of the grants receive funding?
Yes, it's really only 5%.
No, 5%.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
very small.
Well.
But we're making
Well,
a
thank you
case.
for making the effort. and,
Yeah,
We'll
yeah.
keep our fingers crossed.
That's right. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments on the consent docket?
Only M, I would just point out that this was unanimously approved by the Neighborhood Conservation Committee. This is a project to try and spend Neighborhood Stabilization Program Phase 3 funds for a project on the 400 and 500 blocks of East Sheridan. That's an area that was considered undevelopable because there's 96-inch pipes that would cost about $3 million to move. I would just say that there's time is of the essence, only because these funds have to be, I think 50% have to be expended by this time next year. Okay. I thought it's not this September.
50% of the funds have to be spent by spring of 2013, 100% by spring 2014.
Okay. Thank you.
And that was Matt Gabrielson from the Planning Department.
Thank you, Ed, for pointing that out. Are there any questions or other questions or comments on the consent docket? Hearing none, would you all cast your votes, please? And those items pass unanimously. Moving on to Agenda Item 7, which is the concurrence docket. Looks like the majority of the items relate to the Water Utilities Trust and Maps for Kids Trust. Are there any comments or questions on the concurrence docket?
Move the concurrence docket.
Second, cast your votes. And those items pass unanimously. Moving on to Item 8, which are items requiring separate votes. Item 8A1 is an ordinance on final hearing. The address is 11500 North Kelly Avenue, conversion from an R1 single-family residential district to PUD 1443 plan unit development. This is in Ward Skip.
Madam Mayor, I haven't received any objections to this project. Is the applicant here? Can you just briefly give us a summary of?
Yes, sir. This is a project that we have been in coordination with the neighboring property owners for approximately a year and a half. It is a piece of property that Legacy Bank owns. When they ended up with the property, we sat down, started a number of meetings. We've had 8 revisions to this PUD through this process. Planning Commission recommended approval, and what we tried to do was comply with the select area plan, which we do, but also be sensitive to the neighbors that live on acreage tracts. So we have ended up shifting our RA-type development over to the east portion of the property and have a large common area. We have a lake, and it's a mixed-use project that the neighborhood stood up and supported at the Planning Commission, and to my knowledge continues to support.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. I recommend that we move this.
Second?
All in favor? Cast your votes. And the item passes unanimously. Item 8A2 is PUD 1450. The address is 2201 Southeast 40th Street, from PUD 632 and PUD 464 to PUD 1450, Plan Unit Development District. This is also in Ward 7.
I haven't received any opposition to or any calls against this project, so I recommend that we pass it.
Is there a second?
Second?
Second. Cast your votes. And that item passes unanimously. Item 8B has been deferred until April 10th, and item 8C has also been deferred until March 20th.
Madam Vice Mayor, I believe Councilman Shadid, and I know for sure that Councilman White will be out of town next week, and Councilman White has asked that we put this off until actually the 27th, that he could be back for that, and so we will cause that to happen.
Great. So the new date on item 8C, which is our ordinance on ticket sales, will be 3/27.
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Item 8D is an ordinance on final hearing relating to the prohibition of parachute jumping and other things from buildings. Are there any further questions or comments? This is the third time we will have heard this.
Been some articles on that over the last week or so.
Second. Cast your votes. And that item passes unanimously. Moving on to 8E. This is an ordinance to be introduced today and set for public hearing on March 20th related to our bike share program. And Jennifer Gooden is here today to give us a bit of a presentation. Good morning, Jennifer.
Good morning. I'm Jennifer Gooden, Sustainability Director. And the purpose of this ordinance is to establish membership and user fees for the bike share program that will launch this spring. This ordinance adds a new section to Article 1 of Chapter 2 to allow for the administration of fees for participation in sustainability programs. And it also adds a new section of Article 2 of Title 2 of Chapter 60 to establish the rates. People who wish to participate in the bike share program can sign up for a membership on the website, or they can do it directly at a kiosk at any of the stations. And there are two components to the fee. There's a membership fee and a user fee. The membership fees can be issued by the day, the month, or the year. So someone who's visiting in town and wants to just get a day membership can do that, or someone who's in town or in the downtown area longer on a routine basis could get a monthly or annual membership. The rates are $5 for a day membership, $20 for a monthly membership, or $75 for an annual membership. Each membership includes an unlimited number of free 30-minute rides for the duration of their membership. And bicycles can be returned back to the same station where they were checked out or to any of the other stations. So if a rider is using the program only for short rides, that first membership part of the fee is the only part of the fee they would pay. However, if they want to keep the bike longer, they can do so by choosing to pay a user fee of $30 per half hour. And this ordinance also establishes the hours of operation for the program, the maximum charges per day, the fee for not returning a bicycle, and the discount, and offers discounts for group or special promotions. The kiosks and the website both will include signage and a lot of information about how the fee structure works. We want to make sure that people have a positive experience with it, and so they'll be well informed up front about the dual components of the membership and user fee. And the recommended fee rates were chosen based on a review of other cities' bike share program rates with two goals. One was that we wanted to price it affordable for an Oklahoma City market, recognizing that this was an introductory program, and we also wanted to keep the program pricing as streamlined as possible. So compared to other cities, our fees are toward the lower end of comparable rates, and our fee structure is more streamlined than many, if not most, all other bike share programs. And we really believe that the success of the program lies in getting people out there on the bikes, and so our financial model for this program We'll seek revenue from sponsorships to make up the difference between our operating costs and the fees that come in through membership fees or user fees.
Jennifer, although this is beyond the scope of the ordinance today, I know it's related because people want to know when this is going to be up and where the stations are going to be. So if you could give us a quick guideline of what our next action steps are over the next couple of months.
Sure. I actually brought a map of where the stations will be.
That's not just okay, whatever.
We're expecting to have the equipment installed right around the 1st of May with an official launch on Bike to Work Day on May 18th. The stations will be located, one at Midtown, just north of 10th and Walker. There'll be one at the Cox Convention Center on the southwest corner near the arena and the Myriad Gardens. We served by all three there. One at the Memorial, one at the Bricktown Ballpark, one at Deep Deuce, and one at the Downtown Library.
Jennifer, will you be running this program?
No, we'll be coming back to you in a couple of weeks to approve a contract with Downtown OKC to administer the program. They'll do the program management and promotion of the program.
Great, I love the name. Spokies is going to be wonderful.
I think it was a good one.
Does anybody have any questions of Jennifer Leary?
Yeah, in looking at the detail here, the estimated cost to operate this for the first year is $112,000.
Is that in the ordinance? That was the fee that we had preliminary for the first 12 months of operation. When we'll be coming back to you for the Downtown OKC contract, it will be for about $58,000. And that will just be for this fiscal year. In all future fiscal years, we expect that sponsorship revenue and membership and user fees will cover all the costs of operation. So that is the total amount of expenses to pay to Downtown OKC, but doesn't take into account the revenue that will come on the program.
So right after that, where it says the charge for these services to recoup some of the expenses, when you go into the sponsorship, the goal is for this program to be revenue neutral, that all the costs will be made up through the fees plus the sponsorships?
That's our goal on the operations side. That will not cover capital and expansion. So we'll look at sponsorships as one way of financing expansion. We'll also look at grants or other opportunities.
Well, I guess my bottom line question is this supposed to be a revenue neutral program? Are we supposed to get money through different sources to pay for the entire program, or is this going to be subsidized?
Our goal is for it to be revenue neutral for operations.
That's what I think.
But not for capital.
Not for capital.
Yes, sir.
Will we get periodic reports on how this thing is going?
Absolutely.
To see? Thank you.
Any other comments?
Just a question. Downtown OKC will administer or manage the program?
Yes.
Do they have somebody on staff who's done this before, or is this going to be a brand-new experience for them?
Mr. Ryan, I don't believe there's anybody in town that's done this before. I don't believe there's anybody in town that's done this before.
That's what I was afraid of.
Yeah.
Yes, with that caveat, but they do have, they've been interested in bike share for several years and have been involved in helping us. They actually came up with the name Spokies with the promotion and research of the program for the last couple of years. So I think they're as familiar with it as anybody in Oklahoma City.
At these locations, will there be any safety equipment available to rent also?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
At these locations, will there be any kind of safety equipment to rent as well?
No, we don't have the capacity to lease those out. We do recommend a helmet for riders, but they would need to bring their own helmet.
Your Honor, if I may, because Pat brings up a good point, there's not that many people who have experience with these types of things, only in cities that may currently offer these types of programs. But Jennifer and I attended a presentation from Don Rittenhouse at the University of Oklahoma, who's the director of the Office of Sustainability for DuPont Corporation. She's very impressed with the city of Oklahoma City with all of their efforts in the area of sustainability. I think it's just another example of us kind of taking the lead in a variety of areas, and sustainability certainly falls into one, such as the program we're going to be implementing with the control of traffic signals in an effort to reduce gasoline consumption, potential smog. This activity and all the others that our Office of Sustainability is performing with respect to reducing utility costs and other energy consumption, I think we really are setting ourselves up as one of the leaders in the area of sustainability, and Jennifer deserves a lot of the credit for that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on the bike share program? I think we had a motion and a second on item F. Cast your votes, and the item passes. Thank you. We will have a public hearing on this item next week.
Yes, ma'am.
Item 8G is a public hearing regarding item 8F is a resolution to be introduced and set for public hearing declaring, where am I? I thought I just did that. No, I just did E. I'm sorry. That's what I was asking about F. Beginner's errors here. Item F1 is an ordinance to be set for public hearing. That's why we have this whole crowd here. You thought I was going to skip you, didn't you? Item F1, and there are two companion items, is an ordinance to be introduced and set for public hearing that provides for the adoption of the International Building Code of 2003 edition, the International Existing Building Code 2003 edition, and the International Residential Code for 1 and 2 family dwellings, the 2009 edition. Do we have someone to speak on this? I guess we do.
Bob Tiener.
Good morning, Bob.
Director of Development Services.
I have a brief presentation, just kind of explain the process here. This item really does two things. We're asking to amend the administrative section of our 2003 International Building Code. That's our existing commercial code, as well as replace the 1995 CABO residential code with the IRC 2009 residential code. This is a list of our existing codes. Part of the Development Center's process is to try to update our codes. As you can see, we have a 95 and 96. The adoption of the 2009 will bring those to the current regulations. The 2000 and 2003 International Commercial Codes, currently the state is reviewing the 2009 code, and they will, once they make a recommendation, we'll proceed with the process through our code commissions to review that and bring it back to you. It'll probably, we anticipate it'll be next fall before we get that. But once we get to that point, we'll be caught up. In 2011, the Oklahoma Uniform Building Code Commission adopted the IRC 2009 code with amendments. What I've done here on the next two slides, I've tried to highlight just, it's really a wide range of changes. The first one there is the automatic fire systems. What they did, they recommended that these be put in the appendices and not made as a minimum standard, and then it gives the municipalities a local option to adopt or not. And there's a couple examples: carbon monoxide alarms, standards for putting in storm shelters, interior load-bearing walls. I have staff here that could explain the details if you want, if you have questions, but I'd note the last one. Chapter 11 is an energy efficiency code. Sometime in the future, you'll be asked probably to consider that as a resolution adopting that as our first step in an energy conservation code. So, Jennifer, the Office of Sustainability will bring that back. I just want to briefly go over the process here. Once it was adopted by the state, our staff started a process where we contacted various building code associations that will work with that code. Our residential code commission reviewed it. Plumbing and mechanical appeals and code commissions all reviewed it. We had a series of meetings going through all the amendments, and at the final hearing, those code commissions all recommended that it be adopted the same as the state did. It is a part of the appendices, not a requirement, and then the city can consider it. And that's what I'm saying here at the end is it's an option for each municipality to decide if they want it as a requirement or not.
But the recommendation out of our code commissions was not to adopt it.
Was to adopt it as the state did. That's correct.
It's my understanding that there's a bill running through the state out there to specifically prohibit cities from adopting a code on residential fire sprinklers stricter than the state code. Do you know where that bill's at?
The last update I had is that it passed in the House, and I haven't heard if it's been voted on in the Senate yet or not.
Maybe Jane Abraham could come in, and I think she's tracking that and can probably give us a more current update on that, Council.
So even if we wanted to and that bill passes, then it'd be a moot issue?
That would be correct.
Any other comments or questions? Set it for, I think it's set for hearing next week.
2 weeks, the 27th.
And final adoption on April 3rd. Ready? Is there a second?
Second. I have another comment, though.
Yes, Pete.
You know, I think if there is a bill in the legislature to prevent us from adopting this code, we should be opposed to that bill. Not on the basis about fire sprinklers, doesn't have anything to do with that. But the propensity of the legislature to try to tell us how to run the city, I just think we ought to, on general principles, we ought to oppose that. I'm opposed to it on them telling us what to do about smoking, on them telling us to do about, they have no business trying to regulate this city. They don't do a very good job of regulating the state, and we don't need them down here trying to regulate what we do. That has nothing to do with the sprinkler issue. It has to do with the fact that we ought to stand where we are on that and say that the city of Oklahoma City ought to have the right to run this city as a charter city. We should have the right to run this city the way we believe it. Now, again, it has nothing to do with the sprinklers, because nobody else, or very, 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 very few people in the whole country have adopted the sprinkler system. But that ought to be our decision and not a decision dictated to us by people that don't have to live under the rules they make.
Jane Abraham, can you update us on the legislation?
Yes, it's passed the House, and I don't believe it's been assigned to a Senate committee yet. So there's time to address the bill and try to see if we can get it. The provision to prohibit us adopting requiring sprinklers for residential in our building code was done as an amendment to another bill. So anyway, we've got some time to try to address that.
What other preemption efforts are there, if any? There was one on sexual orientation. There's now one on sprinkler system. What else are they?
There's one on dealing with water systems, requiring a renewal of underground water leases every 10 years. I'm trying to think if there's...
We were supportive on one last week that had to do with election regulation. So we had sort of a bifurcated viewpoint of this. We like it, we're for it. If we don't like it, we're against it. So
what was that?
The resolution we had supporting the election modifications. And I think that this was sort of contrary to what you just said.
I think that's a different matter altogether. That's a cost matter.
That's right. It's a different matter. I know.
Well, it is a different matter. I mean, don't be sarcastic about it. It is a different matter. It is a different matter. One of them is a cost matter. One of them is a cost and a public input in the election process. The other one is just a strict preemption on how we run government. There's certainly a bright line between those two for me.
Mayor, if I could.
Yes, sir.
I know this is going to be heard 2 more times, and I promise you won't hear me 2 more times, but I've got to make a few comments. Hopefully people understand my background. And my family spent 3 generations trying to preserve life and property in Oklahoma City. So you can't expect that I'm going to be very supportive of something that I know works. Residential fire sprinklers save lives. There's just no 2 ways about it. They do. There's very few things that are updated in the codes that aren't life safety driven, the major changes, whether it be electrical, whatever it may be, construction standards, whatever it happens typically because it's been proven that upgrades that are done save lives. And that's what the residential fire sprinkler system is. So I'm a little concerned that my fellow firefighters out there, especially since it's running through the state to preempt us from doing it, are not out there beating the doors down at the state to save lives as much as they beat the doors down to save their labor issues out there. And to me, that's a problem. It's a problem for their protection of the citizens in the city. Having said all of that, for my home builder friends in the audience, and I still consider them friends. They may not feel the same way, but they're still my friends. One of the very first things you learn when you're in command on a fire department is to realize what you can save and what you can't save. And what you can't save, you need to write it off and forget about it and move on to what you can save. So I've said my piece about residential sprinklers. I don't think the votes are on this council to adopt it, and I know the votes are not out at the State House to do anything to adopt it. So I'm going to cut my losses and move on at this point in time.
I'd like to see us consider some things that kind of along the lines of what Gary's saying, separate from the sprinkler process. Would it be possible for us to add to the code something that would require hardwired warning systems, fire detection equipment inside houses on remodels? Because when we talk about where lives are being lost, they're being lost in old structures. That's where people are dying. Very few people are dying in new construction because the other parts of the code have made them much fire safer than the typical older structure. You know, on remodels we now require on plumbing we require the people put a backflow valve in when they do that. I don't know why we couldn't require a hardwired smoke detection system on remodels above a certain percentage of the property, because that's where people are dying.
That is required on remodels.
It's in this new ordinance.
No, it's already required in remodeling. Smoke alarms. Yes.
Wired smoke alarm, or just
Yes.
smoke alarms?
I thought I had a good...
Yes, that's on the current code, so when we remodel anything, it is to be brought up to the new code, so on remodels, that is covered.
And new construction now requires a hardwired...
Yes, that's been required for quite some time.
And so, okay.
And this is all, including all apartment complexes?
Yes.
This is David Adcock, our Chief Inspector.
Yes, I'm sorry.
David, where does that kick in?
On,
we say remodel.
On any of the parts that are remodeled, that they are required to be brought up to today's standards, and that is already required.
Okay, does the entire structure have to be hardwired?
No, it's only the parts that are being remodeled. As you remodel those, then they're required to be brought up to today's codes, or whatever is the current code.
When you say only the parts to be remodeled, what are you talking about?
Suppose from another fire, well then the section that was damaged by the fire that requires the remodel, or whatever is being remodeled, the part of the building that is included in the remodel, that is required to be brought up to today's codes, on all the codes.
Would it be possible to change that, say if the house remodel is, say, as much as 25% of the total house, then they have to hardwire the whole thing?
I guess it could be done, yes. I mean, that's not the code right now. But
I understand. But if the idea is to try to do something to make older construction safer, it would seem to me that there ought to be a threshold that if they crossed a certain threshold, they had to put smoke alarms in, hardwired smoke alarms in the whole house, because, again, at the risk of being more redundant than I normally am, that's where we're losing lives.
As I understand it, our current code says that if the percentage of the house being remodeled, there's a percentage kick-in that they have to bring the whole house up to code, I believe. And that's when you'd have to redo the whole house that way. And until you hit that percentage, I assume the ordinance says you can just do the part that's being remodeled. But in all fairness, I got to tell you the issue with any system, whether it's hardwired or not, is not necessarily requiring it to be put in. It's the people maintaining it after they get in there.
Right. Well, I think that's why a hardwired system is more effective than a battery system.
Yeah, but they can turn that off as easy as they can not put batteries in a battery detector too. You know, when they decide that they don't want it anymore.
Well, on that issue of turning off the system, you can turn off the sprinkler system too, if you don't want it. But I think the Home Builders Association is making an offer to install hardwired smoke detection systems, and somebody could speak from their group to discuss that, as well as the Oklahoma Community Actions Council can provide funding for that. So I think it's an issue of education. And Carter, could you enlighten
Carter
us?
Flory with Coyle Enterprises.
Right.
I think we're having a hearing today, and I don't think that's quite fair to the public because they've not had an opportunity to come here and make a mistake. If some of them happen to be here, that's great. I think Bob Keener's explanation why we're here, what we're doing here is great. I think we're getting into a discussion that should be properly held with the public's awareness after sufficient notice.
Pat, I'm only given an opportunity to educate the public of the ability to take advantage of something.
I think that's great, but I think
We'll invite everybody to come back next week then and share that information to us if they could. Great. We have a motion and a second on the table. Is everybody ready to vote to move it forward to public hearing in 2 weeks? Cast your votes. Motion passes unanimously. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Thank you, Pat. Moving on to item G, I hope, F, no? We did them all together. We did F 1, 2, and 3 together as they were just introduced for the first time. So I've tried to move on to item G about 6 times now. We're going to do that one more time. Item G1 is a public hearing regarding dilapidated structures. And we have one person here to speak on item 8GD. Sherry Williams, would you like to come forward? And while Sherry's coming forward, this is a structure located at 904 Northeast 4th Street. Sherry, would need your name and address for the record, please.
Sherry Williams, address is 5705 Southeast 82nd Street, Oklahoma City.
Sherry, would you pull the microphone down so we could hear you a little bit better? Thank you. Those of us that are short know we have to do that all the time.
Martha Hurst, Sherry's my daughter, also the property owner.
Alrighty. Are you the property owners?
No, I'm the property owner.
Alrighty. Skip, do you want to go ahead and run the conversation?
Good morning, Mr. Hurst and Ms. Williams. You know, I don't know if many people know, but this is a structure that is a historical legacy in the city of Oklahoma City, and of course known by many artists, and that has been through Oklahoma City for one reason or another in the entertainment business, and the residents that grew up in the area that can sometimes referred to as the Deep Deuce part of 4th Street. But it's the old Jewel Theater, and I understand that Mr. Hurst has had, ownership of this property for quite some time. It now comes to us on the dilapidated list, and I have absolutely no problems in reference to, because I know that Mr. Hurst has had some trying times in reference to trying to find the proper means of connecting resources for this facility, for this building, for a historical remembrance of Oklahoma City. I understand that there's some issues that staff have identified, and I'd just like to see if Mr. Hurst and staff could have some time to talk to see if we can get some understanding in reference to some benchmark of time to correct those problems. I have absolutely no problems in giving whatever time is necessary that's reasonable in reference to this project. It is my understanding that you're trying to restore the building, right?
Yes, I am. I've recently now we're having the building classified as non-profit, so we try to secure some sort of financing for renovating of it.
And I think I don't know if the rest of the council received a copy of a letter from our planning director, Mr. Russell Klaus, in reference to the Historic Preservation Commission at their regular meeting on March the 7th, who considered the proposed structure action for the Jewel Theater. And also there's another project, Leora's Beauty Salon. And neither one of the projects or the structures are zoned as HP or in the HL district, but I think for the historical legacy of both of the buildings, you know, it would do us well to try to figure out a way to work with the owner of the property to see if they can you know, satisfy the requirements that's necessary in order to bring it up to some decent presentations without having to have these hearings in reference to considering demolishing the place.
So do you own both of the properties?
No, I just own the theater itself.
Just 904?
Right.
Alrighty. And what kind of steps have you been taking?
Well, I recently spoke with the chief inspector about the building, and to what we're trying to have done on it as far as making the building safe and replacing the roof on the building. So hope to be able to do that sometime soon.
I mean, I drove by it yesterday, and it's a beautiful building, and it looks like with some attention it could be saved, but with trees growing out of the roof, we've got some really serious problems.
I personally climbed up there last year and put some poison on the trees to stop them from growing. But the rest of the building, we're supposed to, in the process now of having the bricks replaced on the edge of it, and also to try to find funding for the roof, to have the roof replaced.
Well, I mean, I think Russell's memo points out that it is a really important structure to the history of the community. And
Well, I think it's important that we keep our ties to our history, and I think this building and the beauty shop next door to it are important in our history of this Oklahoma City. However, it's an insult to that legacy if this building continues in this condition very long. I mean, it needs to be fixed. It needs to be brought back to some kind of useful thing as quickly as possible, because it is an important link to our history. But the way it is right now, it's an insult to that legacy. You know, if it had been functioning, if the original owners could see it now, I think they would be really upset about the way it looks, the way it's being maintained. And we need to do something to keep these kind of buildings. But we can't just sit there and watch them decay further and further all the time. We've got to have a positive plan in place to get these things taken care of.
Well, and there's a tipping point at which it can't be saved any longer. And so we may be there. Right. Skip,
Charles.
Yeah, Charles.
I'm sorry, Madam, Mr. Mayor. Charles, do you have any suggestions in reference to Mr. Hertz as far as trying to move it off of this list?
Well,
what are the major issues that you would consider that could be cured that could move it off the list now?
Well, right now, it probably deservedly so needs to be on the list simply because of the danger it presents to the community. The parapet wall, Danny will flip to that slide, it's collapsing. It's got falling brick. There's numerous holes in the roof that's in bad shape. That's one of the things that he will need to address. We've assured him that we'll work with him on, for, an appropriate amount of time to correct the problems that we see are probably an immediate danger to the community. It's close to a daycare, it's close to a school. As you can see, there's a large amount of the wall that's collapsed and laying on the ground. That's what we perceive as probably the most danger at this point is the continuing collapse of that parapet wall along the roof line. Also, the walls themselves are crumbling due to the large amount of trees that are growing up through the structure that are damaging the roof and the walls. Those can be addressed. We've assured him that we'll work with him. He needs to get a plan in place. Problem is, it's been this way for years and years, and it steadily gets worse. And right now, we're at the point that if it's not addressed, it probably cannot be saved.
Well, I think it's worth saving, and I would ask the rest of my fellow councilmen to allow Mr. Hurst an opportunity to work with staff. I understand that he probably can't cure everything at one time, but I think if he shows a good faith effort in some of the major structural issues that, this is one of the 3 lasting buildings that African Americans had in reference to a theater in the state of Oklahoma prior to the passage of the Civil Rights Act in 1964. And in the community where it's presently situated, we see a rebirth of residents and housing coming back to the area to have the legacy of something of the Jewel Theater still standing. And hopefully it will, as Councilman Ryan stated, that, it develops into something that really honors the history of those individuals who built the building. So, Mr. Hurst, if you could work with Mr. Locke and set some time frames in reference to making some immediate, good faith efforts towards curing some of the major problems. We have absolutely no desire to demolish this building. With that taken as the conditions in reference to going forth with this. Are you willing to do that?
Yes, we're
Yes, sir.
trying to get the building to a safe, where it's safe to and stop the brick from falling off and deterioration of the building.
Okay. Well, I think the most important thing is to work with staff with a plan, and I think that's going to mean contacting a contractor, someone that can draft some type of a plan that will move forward towards addressing the issues that they have identified here today.
And I think the plan's got to be more than just to maintain the status quo. It's got to be a plan that makes it a useful and realistic tribute to what's been done out there. And I think just keeping it safe is a good step, but it's a step in a process, and the process ought to have as its result at the end, I think, restored to some useful condition to be used in the community. I think it's great that way. But I think if all we settle for is it's going to be safe, then I have no feeling at all that we're actually going to go forward and take the steps to make it what it should be made.
Well, Skip, our process would be that if we were to leave it on, and it's, if you want to move to do something else, we certainly can, but if we leave it on, they're free and should be working with staff all the way along, and we won't take any action on the property as long as there's forward movement to make it safe and to begin to bring it back, as Councilman Ryan said, to something useful. So are you suggesting, Skip, you want to take it off the docket, or you want to leave it on?
Well, I would like to leave it on because I think that gives us, some oversight as it relates to Mr. Hurst working with staff and having a way that we can have some immediate, correspondence back in reference to the progress of the project. Is that?
That's fine.
But we're being very clear that we want to work with you, and we'll do whatever, we can within the constraints of it being safe to be able to help the project go forward.
Yeah, that's fine.
Now, is there anybody here that related to 830 Northwest 4th Street?
Madam Mayor, I did not, I received a couple of emails from Senator Johnson in reference to both of these projects, but I haven't had any direct contact with anyone in reference to Leora's Beauty Salon.
And the structure appears to still be in reasonably good shape, but it's unsecure at the moment.
Thanks.
And it looks like it needs to be immediately secured.
The structures do have different problems. The add-on in the back, the wooden structure, is probably dilapidated. The front structure could, of course, be saved if the owner would put, the time and effort into it to save it.
Charles, have you had any contact with?
Yes, we have, and they're basically going over their options for the building at this time is what they've expressed to us.
So we've identified the owner of the property?
Yes, he's been in contact with us.
I think this is a really loud call to action.
Yeah, this one.
This is a moment that something needs to happen, or there is a risk that we'll lose these two buildings on 4th Street too.
Did he give you any directions in reference to a plan that he had for the property? Or he or she?
Well, I think they're still weighing the option of repairing the buildings or, remodeling or demolishing, depending on the amount of damage that are, when they get in and actually find, everything that it's going to take to rehab them.
I see the head of our HP commission here shaking her head. It's sad.
This one, that's not Leora's Beauty Salon.
It's part of it. It's part of it on the property.
That's part of the
Yes.
whole property?
On the backside.
Yes.
Alrighty. Well, Skip, if you're content with leaving...
That needs to go. I have absolutely no reservations about it. That needs to go. But the beauty salon itself, I was more concerned about it because of the historical history of the beauty salon. But I didn't know that was all part of the same the same land.
Yes, it's all on the same property. Dan, if you go back to the add-on in the back, that's probably the building, the structure it's probably the worst shape of the wooden structure that's on the back that holds through the wall. The roof's in bad shape. It's pretty rough. The front part can be saved. I think that's what the owner is actually looking at now.
Is the front part?
He's going to look at the entire property, but that's what he's having to look at to see if he's going to try to rehab it or not, is the cost and the structural integrity of the inside of the building.
Okay.
All right. Do we have a motion and a second on item G1?
I'm moving. Second.
Second. Cast your votes, and those items pass unanimously. Item H1 is a public hearing regarding unsecured structures. And is there anyone here to speak on unsecured structures?
Second.
Second. Cast your votes. Items pass unanimously. Item 8I, I understand we do not need executive session. Is there a second? Second. Thank you. That's moved. Item 8J, I understand we do need executive session.
Yes.
Ready? Get your votes. Thank you. Say that again. Item 8K, I also understand we do need executive session.
Yes.
Second. Move to executive session. Item 8L are claims recommended for denial. We have 2 of those. Is there anyone here to speak to claims recommended for denial? Good morning. I will need your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Ernestine Anthony, and I am speaking for Eli Rubowitz, who has spasmodic dysphonia, and I believe that the councilmen have an explanation of that problem before them. Is that correct?
I don't know that
Do
we
you
do.
have that before you?
I don't know that we do.
We're here today, and before we begin a presentation, I would just like to say that Eli and I both want to give our sincere condolences to Councilman Shadid in the loss of his cousin. Truly, the world lost its greatest journalist. And I also want to say a special thank you to Amy Kronk, who has been so kind and so generous with her time in working with Eli and with me and explaining to us the law. And we understand that as an attorney, she has to go by the law, and so you have her recommendation before the council that Eli's claim for damage to his home should be denied. But we do know that the final decision rests with you, and so we ask that you would look at the documents that she has provided for you. You have those before you. And the pictures, they're not pretty pictures. You probably don't like to look at them.
You're welcome to pass the pictures around if you would like to.
I believe Amy has those on a
Does
flash drive.
Amy have them on a flash drive? Okay. Great.
The pictures vividly depict the damage to his home that occurred in early November. And since Eli is not able to speak on the telephone, he asked me to call for help. And I was told that they were overloaded and that it would be some time before help could come to take care of this raw sewage that had completely filled his bathtub, and in the guest bathroom, the shower was overflowing. We waited an hour, called back again, and was told that extra crews had to be called in and that they would be there as soon as possible. This all started around 11:30, and as you will note, help did arrive at 8 minutes after 2. That's 2.5 hours that Eli spent trying to put down newspapers to stop this, trying to put down towels. He slipped in the bathroom, hitting his toe on the vanity, which caused him to eventually have his large toenail removed. So it was very important that he not be around or be exposed to all this damage that was done in his home. But the crew did come, and they worked until 6 o'clock in the morning, just suctioning. And but they told him that they gave him a number to call to submit a claim to the city. They did send the forms to be filled out. But we were also told that he should contact a restoration company, which he did, Blackman Mooring, and you have before you all of the many things that they did. They had to send a different crew for everything, and this just went on for weeks. The final thing was having to have the floor, after the carpets were taken up and disposed of, the floors had to be sanitized, they had to be steam cleaned, they had to be sealed, which meant that all the furniture in the home had to be taken out. He had to rent a pod which sat on the driveway for a month. He had to hire someone to move the furniture out because he and I could not lift that heavy furniture. But all this was done, and he was finally able to move back into his house after a period of about 6 weeks. And When he was going back, I said to him, well, you have a nice, clean home to go to. And he said, it's not a home, it's a house. This is a house, a home, that he and his wife had purchased 39 years ago. And during these 39 years, they've faithfully paid their water bills, and they expected, just trusted, that if they needed help or services to be rendered by the city, that would happen. But 39 years, and for the last 19 years, he's lived in the home alone. His wife died 19 years ago. She was a teacher, and I did not know her because Eli and I met through a grief support group after my husband died in 1995.
Do you think
I learned to know his wife through pictures that he has shown me, through scrapbooks that she kept. And those were some of the precious things that he was trying to save, while all of this slush and slime, and you can't imagine the smell, he was trying to lift up everything that was in the floor and move it to higher places.
Do you think it would be all right if we heard from Amy now? May we hear from Amy, please, to tell us a little bit about her findings in the case?
Good morning, Amy Kronk, Municipal Counselor's Office. The information that we received from line maintenance was that there's been no prior problems on this line segment. Unfortunately, Mr. Rubowitz's private line fell into the city's line, which did cause a bit of a blockage, and line maintenance did a video inspection after the incident, and the city's line was operating fine. It was just a matter of Mr. Rubowitz's private line having fallen into the city's sewer main, which was repaired.
So, Amy, if I understand, as we've seen in the past with these cases, which are so unfortunate, and we never like to have them before us, but because the city wasn't in any way negligent, we don't have the ability to pay this claim.
That is correct.
And so, unfortunately, the situation is, as a municipality, we're also required to follow the laws, just the way an attorney is required to follow the laws. And because the city didn't cause this to happen, and because we had no prior notice of any damage to the line, we are prohibited from paying this claim.
We understand that there was no prior knowledge of this, but the neighbor to the south had a problem the same night. The city has been back in the past month working on the line, with the neighbor to the north. They're working with pipes that are that large, which says to me that these are the main line, not the private lines that go into the homes. And we're not disputing the fact that there was not prior notice of this. What we're saying is that because help did not come sooner, if help had arrived in 30 minutes after they were notified, all of this wouldn't have been quite so bad, and the expense wouldn't have been so great. And that's what we're asking, is that you will allow this claim, allow him to restore some of the damage that's been done, and have a home again and not just a house.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Skip.
Amy, who had the responsibility to respond to the residents if our position is that his line collapsed into the city line? Is that right? And his line was repaired and we have documentation showing that his line malfunctioned.
Yes. A TV inspection was done.
And Amy, also, is it correct that there was a claim immediately south of this?
Correct. A neighbor did also file a claim, which has been presented to council
and was denied
on February 7th.
So there is more than precedent. I mean, this is actually the law. And Kenny, do you want to just speak to that?
Yes. Unfortunately, we really don't have any evidence that we could hang an approval on this on. We try to approve any of these or bring them to council as disputed facts if we have any evidence that it could possibly be paid on. But on this particular claim, we really don't. And I don't know if there would have been anything that could have been done sooner. And, I mean, I would ask Marcia to address that.
No, I want to talk a little bit about what happens. We all have customer connections, and sometimes those, which unfortunately are the homeowner's responsibility, do fall into our pipes. We can't possibly inspect the pipes often enough to find all of those as they happen. It is unfortunately something that just a side effect of the fact that you can't be in sewers with a TV camera every day on every street. And I want you to know that we do understand. I've had a sewer backup in my own house. I understand how horrible this is, and I'm very sorry. Coming back to the point, what happened, though, because we were seeing multiple problems, we had customer issues at 2 locations, as Kenny said, because sometimes when a customer's sewer collapses, it can cause a backup for others. We go ahead and repair them when we find them. That's a different policy or procedure than we had used in the past. We're trying to get as many of those out as we find them as we can do when, again, it's creating a blockage that will cause other people harm. So,
the response time to...
response time was typical of what was going on that evening, which was a high storm in a small area of the city. So we had anticipated severe storms and anticipated, we were on duty, all crews, just because of timing, all crews were helping others and an additional crew had to be called in. We essentially got there as quickly as we could given the ongoing circumstances of a unique rainstorm that night.
Ready. Thank you, Marcia.
And I would add that even if council denies the claim, Mr. Rubowitz can go to district court on a small claims case and ask a judge.
So that would be the recourse, to ask a judge to listen to the facts. But in this case, we have thoroughly investigated the matter and don't believe that this council has any facts in which to approve the claim. So I'm afraid we're going to have to deny it. So we're then, I think I have a motion, I need a motion on L1, claims for denial. Second. Cast your votes, please. And those passed unanimously. Item 9A is a claim recommended for approval. We just have one. Is there anyone here to speak on that item? Second. Cast your votes, and that item's approved. Item 10 are items from council. Pat, would you like to get started today?
Nothing, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Skip?
I would just like to ask, in the near future, there's 2 items that will be on the council for consideration in reference to the applications for cell towers. And through the communications I've had with citizens that was here last week that are going to be part of the application for the cell tower on Northwest 63rd Street. I would like to know if we could put a list of the cell towers that exist in Oklahoma City. Do they register with the city when these cell towers are established as far as the application, do we maintain a register of where all the locations of the various cell towers are and for what use?
I don't know whether we have actually a list of that, but they do have to apply, even the ones that are permitted by right or conditional uses, and they would have to get a conditional use permit from the Development Center. Bob Teener would probably know the answer to that. If he's still here.
We'll have Bob come in a minute. We have the information. I don't know if we have it, because it's gone back years and years and years, whether we have it in a easy to read format at this point in time.
Bob's on the way.
So we'll see what we've got here. Bob, do we have a comprehensive list of all cell towers in Oklahoma City?
No.
Okay. Could we could probably, I mean, it may take some time, but I'm sure we could go back and research the records and get with our GIS department and probably get something, a database put together.
We do have pieces of a map, and at one point we had some of the companies give us maps of their locations, but we don't have a comprehensive map of all our locations.
So if an applicant gets approved for a cell tower, and 5 years after that they sell the cell towers to another company, there's no registration that they have with the city of Oklahoma City?
No, sir.
And do we have any restrictions in reference to the location of cell towers at all?
Yes, the ordinance regulates that, separation and location.
They're conditional use permits, and even when they're permitted in a residential area, they can't be within 300 feet of a home. So, and if they meet all these conditions as a conditional use, then they're allowed by right, and council doesn't ever see them. The only time that they come to you is if they don't meet those conditions, and then they come to you as either a special permit application or a rezoning like a SPUD.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, I'll get with Bob and further with the other questions I have in reference to this. Thank you. Thank you, Bob.
David?
Thank you, Your Honor. Just wanted to thank the Taylor Park Homeowners Association for inviting me to their meeting last night. We had a very interesting discussion on a variety of issues. One item that continues to surface is just the request for additional police patrols, and so I'm going to make my weekly call to, as we go further into the budget, to try to find ways to increase the number of police officers, firefighters, as well as code enforcement, because those issues continue to arise. And I think there's going to be two ways we can approach that. One is to reduce costs or find savings in other areas. The second is to continue to work towards economic development and improve or work with organizations such as the Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce. I would also like to thank the Urban Land Institute for the grant and coordinating the meeting that Councilwoman Salyer and Councilman White attended last week at the South Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce. The effort to do the survey and study of I-240, I think, has a lot of potential, and hopefully we'll find some ways to revitalize that area from a commercial and retail area, but also to draw in input from the various neighborhoods and communities in that process and just make that a really enjoyable place to shop and conduct business. So I think that's about it. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, David. Pete? Larry?
Kenny, last week you circulated a letter, I think, to the council from that related to the support that Ms. Carpenter gave in a very difficult situation in Rio Bella. And I'd just like to go on public record to thank you and her and all the staff for working on that. It was a very convoluted and difficult situation, and we got a successful conclusion, and her energy and creativity and diligence was a large part of that. So please convey our thanks to her.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Shadid?
Three items I need help with the municipal counselor's office on. One, picking up on Skip, the cell phone, we have two coming up on March 27th. I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. I think just potentially dozens more are coming. I think certainly I want to hear the evidence before making an opinion on March 27th's Ward 2 case, but just kind of reading what's happening nationally and in the state, it seems to me that it's not necessarily about voice anymore. It's not about phone calls. It's about data and pushing enormous amounts of data. And pushing that much data is going to require more and more cell phone towers. And so I think it's time to maybe get our arms around this, not just take it on a case-by-case basis. What I ask for the municipal counselor's office, not necessarily to do it, but just to explore whether there's an expert that could be retained for the city. Because I think what's happening is that the AT&T or the different companies are bringing evidence, they're bringing their experts. The neighborhood simply can't afford, or anybody opposing can't afford an expert to contest, and so we're just relying on one expert from one side. I'm not saying we should do it. I talked to Larry last night. He had some good reasons why maybe we wouldn't want to do that, but if you could just explore whether there is such an expert, whether the possibility of retaining someone to help advise us on what potentially could be dozens and dozens of contested cases. Second is, I've asked, and I talked to Dan, but I want to see if you can help me with a deficit. Something I've struggled with probably more than anything this year, and that's sometimes you think you know the definition of a term until somebody asks you to define it, and then you struggle. And one thing I've struggled with this year is trying to understand the boundaries of the 1927 Oklahoma City Charter, which sets out basically the boundaries for council and for staff in terms of policy making. It is very vague, and it doesn't give me a lot of guidance in terms of what I can and can't do as a counselor. It explains to me, for example, that I can't ask city staff for certain things. I need to go through the city manager. But what exactly am I limited? I mean, does that mean not giving my opinion to city staff? Does that mean, I need some help from you from defining, what are the parameters? And I know that in terms of that it's the council's responsibility to implement policy, city staff, city manager implements policy or is administrator. But certainly on several issues in the last year, we've had some disagreement about what constitutes making policy. I think David and I talked about this recently. Maybe it's just for David and I because it's our first year and it's less intuitive for us. But we're 2 out of 9. I mean, that's a significant number of the council. But in the sexual orientation, we had a discussion about, should that come from city staff or should that come from us? Is that policy making? The Alliance for Economic Development, it came up. Project 180, it came up. What constitutes policy making? And so if you could try and define that term for me, I think that would help, because the charter certainly doesn't. And the charter is very vague in terms of helping me understand what it means to implement policy.
Yes, we can do a legal opinion on that and also cover the limitations on council, but essentially an individual councilman cannot administer city government. An individual councilman can't really make policy, and it has to be a majority vote of the 9 members of council that makes policy. And then it's the city manager and his staff that implements the policy set by the council and administers city government. So you can't, for example, an individual councilman can't tell the public works director, I think, these need to be done in this order. The council could make a decision on that. You could bring a resolution to the council, and the council could say, okay, we've sold X dollars of bonds at this bond sale, and we have these projects on the list, and we want these projects done in this order. And then I don't believe you've gone to that level of specificity in the past. I think the projects have just been on the list, and then the Public Works Director has implemented them as necessary in accordance with his his opinion. But I mean, you can get into the level of detail and directing policy that the council wants to do.
And I think that Public Works is some of the problems I've struggled with, is deciding what goes at the beginning of a bond issue, like widening streets, or, and what goes 10 years later. Is that policy making, or is that administering policy? Project 180, we didn't have enough money for everything. So some things get cut out before it comes to the council. Is that policy making, or is that administering?
If you just have a resolution that says we're going to sell this amount of bonds, say $10 million, and they're going to go for these projects and certain projects and certain propositions, and you don't actually direct which order they're going to be done in, then it's up to the administrator.
It is, but we put those lists together with council input. As we develop those lists, we go to the council and say, these are the projects we're looking at going forward with, and we get that, and that is actually adopted by council when we sell the bonds, that this is the list of projects that we're doing this year. Staff recommends them, but it's council that ratifies that and authorizes that to go forward. The same thing with Project 180. Project 180, we had some changes to it. We gave a presentation to the council. We had a resolution to council modifying that budget, which was done in December. That was actually a formal action taken by the council on that to give us the direction to go forward. We make recommendations on policy, but it's actually the council that adopts the policy, gives that back to staff for us to go implement.
Right, and the many things that the city manager brings to you, he's just making a recommendation. The council can reject the recommendation if they want and go the other direction, or the council can say, no, I don't think this is detailed enough. I want to change what this resolution says to make it like this. It's just whatever a majority of the council, whatever their will is. And in dealing with the city administrative staff, the city managers, people working under him, the council really cannot give them any directions at all. That's prohibited by charter. You can ask questions of them and get information from them, but as far as giving the administrative staff directions, that's prohibited by charter.
See if you can get the legal opinion, be as specific as you can, define policy, and then maybe we can revisit some of the examples you just gave about Project 180 and Public Works. But if I can get that legal opinion, then I'd like to look at that. Final thing, I want to just talk, also, I'll need your help and I need to explain the background. The series of articles this week from the Oklahoma has just been outstanding, unbelievable. Starting with the piece on Sunday about what is happening to our city and state with a $7.2 billion impact from addiction. It is an outstanding piece of work. I think part of that, I think Pete said, is Terry White, who is kind of leading this charge and has done outstanding work. But really, credit needs to go to the Oklahoman for pointing out exactly what we're up against. I think as a council, as a county, it's time for us to kind of make a stand and try and make some impact ourselves. I think there's tremendous experience on this council, including but not limited to. I've been involved in the Physicians Recovery Program for many years. I know Pete and Meg have been in the trenches with different nonprofits, First Step and others. We have very lucky to have a district attorney in David Prater who understands addiction, understands treatment, wants people to go to treatment, understands that that's how you solve this problem. But, we saw Safari McDoulet, and that was heartbreaking in impaired drivers and drunk driving. I think David Prater understands that you need to have penalties, but it's really treatment that precludes repeat offenses. So we have problems as a city. We have 4,300 employees. Just playing the numbers, we would have about 500 employees that have to be struggling with chemical dependency right now. I think anecdotally, certainly we have some problems in fire, police, all our city employees, fire, police see some things that people shouldn't have to see. There's some PTSD issues. I'm not saying that we have more of an issue with fire, police, and our city employees than all the other cities of equal size, but we certainly don't have less. And so it is an issue that needs, and people need to get help. I have been involved with the Physicians Recovery Program. for many years. There's no program that has a higher success rate of any profession, of any organization in the state. And it's not just that it has the highest success rate in Oklahoma City. The Physicians Recovery Program in Oklahoma City is a model for the rest of the country, has some of the highest success rates in the country. And so I would just throw out some of the unique things, and then we could decide if anything needs to be implemented. But what makes it successful is that, number one, the program, the medical board, the Physicians Recovery Program has leverage over the physician. If you have a DUI, if you have an incident, you go for an evaluation, you're not going to continue to work. You're not going to, there's public safety comes first, and you're going to have an evaluation. Certainly a second DUI, there's 0% chance you would remain working. You would absolutely go, if you wanted to continue to work, you would go to treatment, period. And I know that we had a police officer who just had a DUI. He was placed on administrative leave, and so there's some similarities there. But I think that it goes further with the Physicians Recovery Program with that leverage. Number two, in the 1990s, we sent physicians to treatment programs. And then we sent some to 30-day programs and some to 90-day programs. And what we found out is the success rate was so different. It was so different that we abandoned all 30-day programs. There's no 30-day program in the United States that you can go to, not Betty Ford, not the Meadows, nowhere can you go to a 30-day treatment program and continue to practice medicine in Oklahoma City. You have to go to a long-term treatment. You have to go to 90 days because the success rate is so much higher. Okay? So I think that needs to be considered when we address trying to help our 4,300 employees. Is if it's good enough for physicians, not just good enough, but mandatory for physicians, why wouldn't we start to think about the same thing for our employees that we're trying to help? The third reason that physicians have such a high success rate is maintenance testing. They sign a 5-year contract after they get back from treatment, and they do testing for 5 years, random testing, some urine, some hair testing, but that's really what keeps the success rate so high. And so for our employees that we've identified, they've gone to treatment, and that's something that I think needs to be implemented and that we can learn from. We talked about when Roy Williams was here, Oklahoma City needs, in terms of proposals, we need a long-term treatment center in Oklahoma City. When somebody goes to treatment, the family is always just as sick as the patient, so the family has to go to the treatment center. It's crazy that everybody has to go to Texas or Louisiana or Kansas. According to those articles, we have 500 to 600 people a day waiting to get into treatment centers. We've had a lot of this NIMBY, a lot of neighborhoods don't want treatment centers in their neighborhood, but with 621 square miles, we should be able to find a place to put it in Oklahoma City. And I think if we're going to use incentives to get businesses that ordinarily wouldn't have happened, this is one we need to look at. I think you have to strengthen testing among city employees. It really, to be testing 4% of fire, 4% of police, it's just, that's not, I just don't think those numbers are high enough to really, and it's not a punishment issue. It's helping people recover and getting people the help they need. But testing 4% of employees a quarter is not adequate. I think maybe we should consider a move towards hair testing. We deal with this in the military down at Fort Sill. Urine testing has become increasingly unreliable. The soldiers are able to buy urine in head shops, and there's all kinds of ways to get around it. Hair testing is much more reliable. Instead of a couple of days worth, if you do hair testing, you would see things like stimulants, cocaine, for 3 months. And it's much more of a deterrent, it's much more accurate, it's much more humane than having somebody observe you. Larry, I think, has talked about for a couple of years having the city council do testing, just to lead by example, just to say that this is something that we're willing to do. And so I guess I'd ask Kenny if what would happen? Because I've talked to enough, I think there's majority support. What would happen if the council wanted to subject itself to testing, hair testing or
You could do voluntary testing, whether or not you could pass an ordinance and force all council members to submit to testing. We need to do a little bit more research on that and do a legal opinion on that. You could do a voluntary testing program. There is a state statute on drug testing, but it does not cover elected officials. It only covers employees. So we'd be glad to do a legal opinion on that.
Please do. I think that's the point. Just let's do something. It's eating away our city. It's eating away our state. Let's send a message that these are things that we care about, and let's do something, and let's take care of our 4,300 employees. Thanks.
Your Honor, I hate to jump in, but just to respond to some of Ed's comments, and it's good we have some media. I think I agree with all three of Ed's comments today, and I don't mean to make light of them because they're all very important. First of all, on the cell phone towers, what I'd like to see with the idea of us being able to hire an expert is just to even the fight out a little bit. Corporate companies that are putting in these towers just have way too much resources compared to neighborhood associations. And while we couldn't support all of them, maybe we could at least get an expert in early, and it would help us to become better educated as we go through this process. So I think that's important. And Ed, I'm sorry, the second issue you brought up was policy. Yes, if we could have maybe even like a workshop where we've had workshops to address that issue, because I think all of us could come up with an example that kind of runs into the gray area of policy versus not being a policy issue. So I think that would be helpful. And then finally, the health issue and addiction, I think that's a very important issue that we need to address. I think that's where we could possibly find those savings and take that just a step further, find some innovative ways to provide health care for our employees, pharmacy, a centralized pharmacy, and some other techniques, but also the testing for addiction. I think that's very important. And Pete, you probably already realize this, the legislature wants to force testing on all state and local officials. So,
except themselves.
Well, of course. No, I'm kidding about that part. I thought that was going to be included. But no, I think that's important. We have to show leadership, and I appreciate Ed's comments on all three of those areas. I think they're all very timely and very important. So thank you. And I'm sorry, Gary, I didn't mean to jump in.
Gary, nothing today? Already, city manager reports.
There's been some publicity recently about, up in Tulsa, some billing issues regarding dams, and I've asked Steve Williamson to come this morning to talk about that. There's also a report, a city manager report in your memo of some observations by my staff on the issue. But Steve?
While Frank's getting set up, I just wanted to agree with Dr. Shadid about the importance, and also it isn't just those who are addicted now. I broke a 5-generational addiction issue in my family when I went into recovery 10 years ago. So it also helps future generations for that decision. We're going to discuss, as you know, a lawsuit was filed, and so I can't discuss the specifics of that, but I can go over generally some of the misconceptions. And briefly, I'd like to discuss misconceptions that we weren't going to file for insurance, that we charge people for out-of-pocket expense who are a member of the Total Care Program, and the use of liens and small claims court, what purpose that is. The background in this was the authority looked at ways, because both beneficiary jurisdictions, there was stress on general fund. We looked at the fact that baby boomers were coming on, 10,000 people a day are turning 65. So more and more people are going to be covered under Medicare. That's also the age in which transport's increased due to chronic illness. We were looking for, to augment the costs that Medicare and Medicaid doesn't pay, how to help the citizens with that. And then also the other reimbursements that were anticipated in the American Health Plan, which would also be reimbursed at below cost. The next slide demonstrates the program. It has always been a factor of the program to charge or bill any third-party payers the patient might have if they are a subscriber. The necessity for that, on your left-hand side, I want to address that bar chart. When you see that, for example, in the West, the expenses are $34 million, where we recovered the revenue to match that expense, you see that we had $10 million from Medicare, 4.6 from Medicaid, $9 million from private insurance, private pay, but those without any insurance was 1.8, the utility fee was 7.1, and the non-beneficiary jurisdictions is 1.8. If we weren't billing third-party payers for services that the patient has paid his insurance to cover, there is no way we can meet the budgetary requirements on what we bring in from the utility fund. So it's always been a function for this to work and to keep the $3.65 as low as possible to bill third parties. Also, that helps cover, which I'll show later, the large number of people that we cover that have no insurance at all, no ability to pay. Go back one more, please. There was issues about the 60-day requirement. In your packet, you'll also see an annual review of how the terminology changed. It has always been a function of the program that if you didn't turn in the insurance information so we could bill, you could be terminated from the program. In 2008, we made a change to that same section to widen, we made the less exclusions to who a member was in a household, because we were now doing it on the utility bills, so we made it less restrictive. It was those living at that address, so we covered more people with it. 2009, we didn't make any changes. 2010, now these changes happen every year after the program. We go back and we look and see what are the phone calls about, what were the questions asked, and all we did was, does the type need to be bigger? So these are all just little changes that were made. It didn't change anything in the program. It was just to make it clearer in our written communications. It was asked, well, how much time do I have to get that insurance information in? We initially put 30 days, but we realized that sometimes the person in charge of getting the insurance information to us might be the one sick. So we increased that to 60 days the following year. Why is it important to put a time limit on it? Well, it's an inducement to get the information in, but it's also a very practical one, a financial one, is that many insurance companies have a timely filing deadline. And if you don't file the account within 120 days, then it's denied when you do file it. So it's imperative for us to capture that on a timely fashion so we can file the claim in a timely manner. So that's the whole deal of the reason for us trying to make that as clear as possible. And the days was put in there as an inducement to get it in.
May I interrupt you, Steve, and ask a question? On your third-party payments, I think that's important. But if somebody was a subscriber to the system who didn't have insurance of any kind at all, he was not Medicare eligible, he had no private insurance, what would the system pay for that ambulance ride for?
Everything.
Okay, that's what I thought.
And we'll get to the magnitude of that in just a second. There's a lot of billing requirements that are due to federal funding of the Medicare program. There was some question why on non-emergencies, if Medicare denies the claim, they only got a 40% discount. And that's because of Medicare regulations, we had to put that in. So we weren't showing that we were using the subscription program is an inducement for unnecessary trips. And that was a federal requirement put into these type programs. But on all emergencies, it covers everything. And that's always been in the program and recognized. The program itself has been very successful. If you look at the
Steve, I'm sorry to interrupt. Just going back to that on the 60-day, I mean, one thing that was pointed out is, was the 60-day policy approved by the board, or how did that come about?
No, I changed, we had in our annual meetings, the tweaking of the putting in 30 when there was nothing, or the 60 when it was 30, was done by staff.
Okay.
It wasn't a change in the program at all. It was just to make it more understandable to the public.
But that part was never approved by the board?
The 30 or 60 days?
Right.
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
If you look at the maps in there, the first map indicates in year 2011, by zip code, the amount of people that had partial or their entire bills taken care of by the program. So you can see that there is wide distribution across the city of people who benefited from the program. And that total for that year was 11,164 individuals had partial or their entire account taken care of by the utility program. That amounted, that's the second map, to $5,729,000 was handled through the utility program. Interesting number to show how beneficial this is for a lot of people. Of that 11,000 that were handled through the program, 3,700 had no insurance at all. To answer your question, Councilor Ryan, 3,700 people of the 11,000 had no coverage at all in this.
And they were not charged anything for handling?
No, sir.
In reference to the encoding of individuals and the address, do your program have the individuals who are registered with the program, are they encoded in a way in which when you get a call to that particular address, that it's not an issue as to whether or not you have to wait for them to provide what medical information or insurance they have?
Okay. To answer your question, we get a database from the city once a month of those who are paying for the program. And one thing that's different about this than Total Care, when we had the Total Care program, you filled out a form, you got a card back, and we got all that medical information up front. Now, since it's citywide, we have to get it after the fact. So each run is compared to the database of the jurisdiction for which you live to see if you're covered or not. Then we seek the information.
So you will always have to inquire of the patient to provide information to you, even though they are in the program.
Right, unless, yes, because there's no way of us, when it's citywide, to get everybody's insurance information beforehand. Now, we check it, a lot of people's insurance changes from year to year. If they were transported by us before, we re-verify the coverage if they respond to us when we seek their information. We verify what we had from the last trip.
Steve, excuse me, may I ask a couple of questions? With respect to billing somebody, if you have a situation where you have a couple living, husband and wife, living together, both of them are covered by the program if they have their fees paid through the utility arrangement. I had a question posed to me a week or so ago concerning a situation where the husband has passed away. You know, the wife is still alive and it continues to be a part of the plan, but she had a concern whether or not she would be covered because the utility bills, for example, are still in the husband's name. But
No, it's address dependent.
Okay.
And that's another complexity of it because, for example, rental homes, it might be in the owner of the home named the TAP, but it's being paid. So it's whoever lives at that covered residence.
And people who do rent have the option of participating in it. They have to go through some other means if they're not paying the utilities.
If the traditional total care program we had in the past where you pay the one fee and it covers, we offer that for those that live in multifamily dwellings that opted out, nursing homes, and so there's both avenues to get to the one program.
And then the final question is, somebody who is currently under Medicare, there is an advantage to sign up for the program. Will Medicare pay for the entire cost of an emergency transport?
There are, no, there's a copay there, and if they don't have a secondary policy to cover that. Also, on emergencies, sometimes they are denied.
I see.
Even though when you would think it would be covered.
But by signing up, they would also be covered under a non-emergency transport if that was necessary.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
There was also some question in the paper about the liens that we file, and it's a little bit misrepresented. On automobile accidents, there has always been a tool for hospitals and physicians to file a lien on proceeds. And about 10 years ago, we were successful in the legislature to have the same type of lien written in the law for ambulance services. So an automobile accident, we place a lien on proceeds, and we have to name the patient and the insurance company. What that entitles us to is that our name is on the check then. It has nothing to do with the property. It doesn't affect the credit rating. It doesn't affect your ability to sell the home or anything on your mortgage. It simply allows us to have our name added to the proceeds of the settlement on that case.
And that was one of the questions that I had asked staff some time ago. The person that is being transported and they are in the program, they're involved in an automobile accident. The automobile accident is no fault of theirs. The other party has insurance. And at some point in time, there's a lien filed from IMSA against the proceeds. The fact that that individual is in the program, do any of the payments that they have as far as being in the program, do it offset any of the cost of the transport because you filed a lien against the proceeds?
Yeah,
so are you saying that all the proceeds, from those proceeds, that the total amount of the bill has to be paid, or the fact that the individual is in the program, do they get any of that paid from the fact that they're in the program?
If there was absolutely no settlements on either side, the membership would have covered the account. But if there were proceeds paid for medical services to include the ambulance service, then that is the portion that our lien would go against.
Well, my question is then, the fact that the individual is in the program, is any of the funds offset because of the enrollment in the program?
Yes, we would only seek and would only receive what was paid by the insurance carrier for his medical bills, which would include our bill.
But if they're in the program, they shouldn't be billed, right?
He's not asking.
Well, it's...
Are you addressing this or a different?
Yeah, what Skip's bringing up. I mean, if you're filing a lien on somebody who's enrolled in the program, you're going to make the other insurance carrier believe that they owe for ambulance services when in fact they don't.
No, they do. They do. Just like we said earlier, all third-party payers are sought after, but the patient isn't responsible for any out-of-pocket expense.
Okay, but oftentimes there's not enough money to go around to pay all the bills. And
Right,
so,
and we work with them individually on that, just like the hospitals do and just like physicians do. No different. The $3.65 isn't going to pay for an ambulance trip by itself.
yeah, but I mean, that's true whether you're in an MVA or just in a house. I mean, it's no different for an MVA.
Well, but there's funds paid by the insurance carrier for medical bills. And it is our job to capture as much of that revenue as possible so we can cover all those who have nothing and to keep the monthly fee as low as possible.
So on the liens for an MVA, how much are you discounting that? Are you trying to collect the full amount, the $1,100?
We try to. If they don't pay that, then we take what they pay.
My concern... That's a standard way of doing it, though. I mean, I've settled claims. I've settled claims before as an attorney, and there's a claim by the hospital in there for whatever it was. Most of the time, the hospital claims are so huge that you can sit down with the hospital and negotiate something less than that. But I've done that when people had their own health insurance, the ambulance insurance. The other company had insurance. They had uninsured motorists. They had every kind of insurance you can imagine. But the hospital still wants to be paid. So I don't think that's unusual. It seems to me that's the way most every carrier, hospitals, doctors do it, chiropractors do it, physical therapists do it. I think that's pretty standard.
But Pete, just from a layperson's perspective, it doesn't seem fair if they've been a subscriber to the service and they were to receive some kind of an award for the fact that they've been injured, that a part of that award would then go to IMSA. Just from a layperson's perspective, maybe that's the way the law operates, and if that's the way it is, that's the way it is.
I don't know why they would be more upset about IMSA than they would be Integris or...
Well, the point, and again, just from a layperson who doesn't follow this that closely, if I signed up and paid a monthly fee, I would assume that that covered the cost of transportation. And then, after an award had been obtained by me due to injuries, that someone took a part of that, that's the part that just doesn't seem fair if I had been paying into the system.
But David, I think what we're hearing here and what should be very clear is that what you're paying for with that $365 is your portion of the cost of that transport.
That's
not
like
the
an
total.
insurance
It's
policy.
not the total cost. You typically, an individual who is insured is going to have their insurance carrier pay and be billed for the bulk of the transport.
The copay and deductibles or any other out-of-pocket expense after any third party is sought is forgiven. So it's a huge benefit for the $3.50 you pay.
I agree. I think it's a good bargain. I would recommend everybody sign up for IMSA Care. I'm just saying, I looked at it as almost like paying into insurance. For example, I pay X number of dollars a month for insurance, thinking that if I ever have a serious operation, the insurance company is going to come in and pay for that instead of me having to come up with all of that money. And if I never have that operation or problem, I've just paid into this insurance company and they've made some money off of me. That's why I kind of look at this IMSA monthly
This is not any different than that.
Well,
It's not any different.
I guess I just need to focus on it.
Yeah.
But if you have insurance and you're paying into your insurance company, you're still going to have a copayment that you're going to have to pay out of your own pocket. An insurance company typically doesn't pay 100%.
Okay, I agree.
So this
Excuse me,
covers
I'm
that
sorry, I didn't mean to
100%.
bring this up. I'm just saying,
Unless you have a secondary. So explain to me, if somebody has Medicare and then they have a secondary, all right, that would pick up their copayment.
Or they haven't met their deductible.
Okay, but let's say they've met they've got Medicare, they've got a secondary. What does enrolling in the utility program get them?
If it's denied, it would take care of it on the emergency side. For example, you go into the emergency room for a broken hip, or you fall, and we take you in to rule out a broken hip. Then we take you home. Oh, they only pay for going to the hospital, not the home. Certain circumstances like that is where it would help. And we tell people, and we counsel them when they call, when they ask should they get it, if they feel comfortable that that both policies that they cover are going to pay for it, then they need to look at it. But there's always deductibles and copays, to deal with, and denials. So, it's... That's correct.
They're not billed the copay. They're not billed the shortage. They're not balance billed. They don't pay anything.
No.
I'm just not sure that our senior citizen would have any chance of understanding this, but B, if they had Medicare and they had secondary, that they're really getting anything for...
I disagree. And if you look at who buys it...
How many times are you taking people back home from the emergency room because they didn't have a broken hip?
Pardon me?
Well, how often does that example...
That particular example happens all the time.
Okay.
All the time. It's one of the ones we take the heat for Medicare denying it. They can't understand why going it was covered and coming home it's not. But that's the rules.
What steps are being taken to try and figure out how many people have paid that were actually enrolled in the program? What are we doing now that this has come out that some people have paid?
Well,
how are we going back over the last 3 years to identify those who erroneously paid?
Well, first of all, we don't feel like that many erroneously paid. But
How do you know that, though?
Because we've looked at the account. I can't discuss those issues till after the
lawsuit.
case. Yes. And as a trustee on the trust, I have updated you on a weekly basis about where we are and what's going on with that. And as soon as we can, we'll address more.
Skip, do you have a question?
You have had some people to opt out of the program that enrolled in the program, then opt out of the program. From Tulsa and Oklahoma City, the two major metropolitan areas, what has been the percentage of individuals who opt out of the program last year in Tulsa and Oklahoma City?
It's very low. The difference is about plus or minus 2 or 3% from the year before. Oklahoma City has been about 3% less than Tulsa, and Tulsa is about 90% opted in. Oklahoma City is a little bit, it's in the high 80s that are opted in.
With some of the opt-out, would it be attributed to the fact that you have apartment complexes who enroll and then opt out?
That's correct.
Which affects the large number of people in the
Councilor Kelly, that's a real problem for us because they don't let the tenants know that they've changed. And we're trying to find ways to address how they should let the tenant know. Some of the confusion that was some of the calls that we received, and we didn't receive, with all this press, our phone numbers have been in there and nothing has cropped up. The average calls are 20 a day more, and they are like 90, we've kept records of those. Like 98% of those are checking to be sure we show them as in. We haven't had, we've found one refund that we've made, that was in the paper, keeping in mind that we transport 120,000 plus people a year and 20-some thousand a year use it, we think our checks and balances are pretty good.
Anybody else? Gary?
Well, I just want to remind people out there that I haven't heard anything in the press that's new. I mean, yeah, if there's been some people that have been misidentified and they were billed when they shouldn't have, and we sent bill collectors after them when we shouldn't have, and all of that, and I think Steve and his staff worked through those issues, and if it's truly legitimate and it gets taken away and all that kind of stuff. But you got to understand that this is an emergency medical service that we're providing, and it's under the same, if you think federal regulations on minor issues are complicated and change all the time, you ought to delve into Medicare and Medicaid, especially when it comes to billing on emergency runs. You'd be surprised how many times Steve's staff has to argue and re-argue with Medicare that it was truly an emergency call. Because at some point, if Medicare says that wasn't an emergency, they just had the flu, they could have driven themselves to the hospital, then if we don't get reimbursed for it, there you are. And the utility fee was simply a way to create revenue and put people in the total care program versus general revenue fund subsidizing IMSA in the Western Division for years. We've been dealing with the same kind of billing issues and the same kind of collection issues for years when we were just subsidizing it out of the general fund. The billing utility fee issue came up as a way to create that revenue and give people the benefit of being on total care if they want to pay that bill. If you think you want to pay 100% of an emergency ambulance service in this city for all citizens, regardless of what they have, then I think you don't want to know what that tax charge would be, what it would cost to do that annually. So all of these issues are all of the procedures, all of the billing, all of the collections, all of the private insurance, Medicare, co-pays, all of that is the same as it's always been. It hasn't just cropped up because of the utility fee has started paying for those people that participate in the program. So should we stay on top of people that have a legitimate claim that they were in the billing program and they shouldn't have been received a bill? Yes, very much so. And if brought to our attention, should we deal with that? Yes. But to say that this system is broken all of a sudden, either because of the utility fee or something new has happened at IMSA, I think is totally incorrect, and I don't think the public should be given that perspective of the program.
You know, I want to comment on, I think Gary's right on. One point that's really important is that when you have a system designed by humans, maintained by humans, occasionally when you're dealing with 100,000 plus accounts, you're going to have a mistake made. It's unavoidable. I would guarantee that any system that administers a program to this number of customers is going to have a mistake. An old line foreman once told me that, Sonny boy, it's not the mistake, it's how quickly you recover. And that's what we need to judge IMSA on. If they do make a mistake, are they prompt in dealing with it? And do they deal with it fairly so that the individual who is involved understands the process? That's what we have to focus on. Not that occasionally we're going to have mistakes made. That's going to happen. It's unfortunate, but I'll guarantee. I've worked for a company that maintained thousands of accounts, and despite our best efforts, occasionally we blew one. But and we're going to make a mistake, but the important thing is how quickly our processes will allow us to deal with that mistake, and if we did make a mistake, correct it. So I think Gary was exactly right. This is going to happen.
We're the first to offer this to a metropolitan area like this. So we're also using different tools that weren't necessarily designed to do this. So we're having to be look at many different checks and balances to use the tools we have. You know, sure it'd be a lot better. The first thing you do when you go to a doctor's office or to any medical facility is the first 15 minutes you're filling out the information beforehand. We don't have that luxury, so we have to do it after the fact. So there's a lot of complications, and we just have to be diligent and have the procedures and the process to look at issues and fix them. Yes.
Steve, one of the things that we've done this morning is we've been just focusing in on the administrative side, what I'm calling it, or the billing and collection side. We are not focusing in on the level of service, the outcomes from the medical people that we have to pick, or the people that we pick up in those emergency situations and have to transport them and administer emergency medical care on the way to the hospital. And you have a couple of reports that I have seen no publicity on that your medical control board director, Dr. Goodlow, has come out with that points about the quality of the service. And so I think the public needs to be aware of that. And then there's another component here. If I have a heart attack and I need to be transported to the hospital and I recover from that and I begin to get bills in, I have the responsibility as a consumer of that service to read the bills that come in and to provide the documentation to whomever, doctor, hospital, therapist, EMSA, to straighten out my account so that we can go forward. And I think that's the missing component that has not been really publicized. That we all have responsibility of consumers of this emergency medical service to make sure our bills are taken care of in an accurate way.
We welcome any call that you might have in reference to the way they count. We're looking at how all the paper reads. We do that every year. That's when we added the numbers or changed the type or look at how it's laid out. But we welcome the phone calls.
Steve, thank you very much for being here.
Well, I want to just say one more thing. I think that, I just remind that when we talked about whether the city should take this over or EMSA, I mean, we were really lectured about how the expertise of the billing department at EMSA and how, it would be really almost impossible for the city to match that. We now have a class action lawsuit against, based on billing practices. We know in medicine, as you know, lawsuits, a large percent of the time is when there's poor communication. It comes down to communication. And that's, I think there's a pretty clear consensus with the mayor of Tulsa coming down, with all the city council in Tulsa. There's a consensus that communication is poor. I mean, that people were harassed, that there's some communication breakdowns. You may make mistakes, but it's how you deal with those mistakes. And that in medicine, that's oftentimes who gets sued and who doesn't sue. I mean, complications happen all the time. But the doctor with the poor bedside manner, and that's the one that gets sued. So you're right, it is how you deal with it, but there's some communication problems here, I think. I don't know, you may say that you don't know that it's broken, but I don't know that we know at this point in time that it's fixed or working either. I don't know that we know the scope of how many people paid their utility fee but erroneously were charged and just went ahead and paid. I mean, right now we're looking at 1,100 lawsuits since 2009, right, that have been filed. So we're focusing on those 1,100 people that Works and Lentz filed to try and collect funds. 1,100 lawsuits in 3 years. That's like, 30 a month against patients? We don't know at this point in time how many people were opted in the program but actually paid. We just don't know the scope of the problem at this point.
Well, I think there's even checks and balances in that. We didn't lose one of those cases. The judge didn't see where we were unjustly.
I mean, you dismissed it. I mean, you garnished wages on somebody in Jinx, and in Jinx you don't even have the option of opting out. Everybody's in automatically, and they garnish wages on a patient.
You heard one side of that story, and that one was an error. You're assuming everything you've read is absolutely the way it is, and I mentioned earlier I can't discuss those till after we file our response.
Okay. Well, we'll talk in executive session then.
Thank you very much, Steve, for coming down. We appreciate it. No, this is a complicated subject. Moving on to citizens to be heard. City Manager, were there any other reports?
No, ma'am.
Great, thank you very much. So we'll move on to citizens to be heard, and we had a couple of people sign up. Erwin Johnson. Good morning, sir. We will need your name and address, please, for the record.
My name is Erwin Johnson. I live at 4500 North Westminster. I'm in the habit of saying Spencer, Oklahoma, but it's Oklahoma City. I just get mail through Spencer. Ward 7. And my complaint is I've always tried to be a good citizen and a good employee. I used to work for Oklahoma City. I was the youngest street maintenance driver ever for Oklahoma City. And I've got this problem that every time you call the police, they don't want to do the paperwork. 30 years ago, when I first moved out there, police came back, he did the paperwork. But he said, more likely we won't find your stuff. I rented this property out. Twice I broke in, they didn't catch nobody. But yesterday, I caught someone stealing my stuff, but the police don't want to do the paperwork. When he gets there, he tells the guy, well, first the guy claims somebody sold him my vehicle. My vehicle was missing, and the property really belongs to what's in my parents' name. They're out of town. They live in Creek County, Oklahoma. So I'm overseeing it. The police, since I'm not the property owner, which I guess maybe I shouldn't have told him my name's not on the deed, he said I don't have any claim, even though my truck is missing. But these people have my friend's truck on the trailer. Only reason why they didn't leave is because their truck quit. Now, before you even hear my side of the story, he said he's not taking anyone to jail today. Now, how can he make this determination without even listening to me? Okay, he said, I don't have any claim. So I tell my friend, well, go ahead and press charges. He tell me, I am impeding his investigation. He wants to take me to jail. Okay, he orders me to leave the property. This is my family's property. These people have stolen my neighbor's cars, my truck. Okay, this truck wasn't worth much. I had just promised it to my nephew. You know, it probably wasn't worth more than $1,500. But they junking it, you know, getting anything wherever it's worth. He orders me to leave the property, my parents' property. I sat across the street. These people leave. Okay, before he even get there, they beg me not to call the police. There's some reason why they don't want the police involved, even if he got a certified letter. He said he had a certified letter. I asked to see it. He couldn't show it to me. I told the police. The police said he couldn't make him see it. But at least ask to see it, even if you can't. But he had, the police let him unload the vehicle, leave. I don't have any proof of who sold him the vehicle. More likely, the person that he claimed that sold him my friend's vehicle probably stole him my vehicle. I don't know the guy's name. I don't even know the police's name. He did not do no paperwork. And then after the people leave, he said, well, everybody's happy. I said, no, everybody's not happy, because my vehicle is missing. And he could at least get a report. I don't even know the officer's name.
Mr. Johnson, Chief City's in the back of the police chief, Bill City's in the back of the room. I think he can probably help you through this issue.
Yeah, yes, and as a matter of fact, people have been dumping cars on my property. I called the police. I helped the police catch one tow truck driver that dumped the car on my property. I tried to be a good citizen and help, you know.
Thank you for coming down, and if you'll talk to Chief City, I think he'll be able to help you. Thanks very much, Mr. Johnson. Thank you. Michael Barlow. Mr. Barlow, we'll need your name and address for the record, please.
Michael Barlow, 5801 Idio. I'm a licensed plumbing and electrical heat and air contractor here in town. Inspection services have gotten so out of control up there that they're just turning down. I mean, they've gotten so nitpicky about things that they're acting like a police force. You know, they got badges, they got radios, you're going to give them guns. Yesterday they turned down one of my houses for about the fourth time for a nail plate. It's just, you know, pitiful. I went up there and talked to Bruce somebody, and he sat down and went through all my inspections and saw where I'd He didn't think it was right. And he promised to do all this. Well, he didn't do anything. These re-inspection fees are outrageous. On the 1st of November, when they adopted a new code, it put about $1,200 on the price of a new house building it. And re-inspections after re-inspections, you can't get a break here.
Mr. Barlow, have you had a chance?
I mean, they go back. I've talked to everybody up there, and I'm sick of talking to them. You know, they're supposed to go out there once, and if they fail everything, they give you a list. They're not supposed to put anything else on the list when they go back out there. Well, they do. They fail it again. They're not following their own rules. They're doing just what they want to do. And there's a few of them up there that's yielding power and making the rest of them. The inspectors are so scared of some kind of disciplinary or whatever that they're just nitpicking those jobs to death and afraid somebody's going to come out there and check their job and fire them.
Mr. Barlow, I think our municipal councilor has some comments to make on this subject.
Yes, the city council by charter is precluded from giving directions to individual city employees such as inspectors. You have to go through the city manager.
This is important.
I've been in your office before.
Well, I haven't been there, or I haven't had an opportunity to meet with you. Have you met with Mr. Teener?
Who?
Mr. Teener?
I know David. I don't know who he is.
Mr. Teener is the Director of Development Services. Mr. Adcock works for Mr. Teener.
Yeah,
Mr. Teener is the Head of Development Services. What you're saying is very important to me. I want to make sure that our developers, our inspectors are fair and reasonable as we go out to enforce the codes to affect public safety. And your concerns concern me greatly. I'd be happy to meet with you, but if you would start with Mr. Teener and see if he can answer some of your questions.
I've talked to him on the phone before. He sent me to Bruce. Bruce promised a bunch of stuff and didn't do nothing. I'm tired of talking to these people.
We would like to work through your issues. I'd be happy to meet with you.
Y'all got the talking part of this done. You need to do something about them. I mean, I'm tired of it. I'm working for free now almost, helping some of these people get some of these properties straightened up that they can't deal with.
No. We appreciate you coming down.
All right.
Thank you very much. Third, we have Joe Sarge Nelson.
Yes.
Kenny, did you want to speak on this subject as well?
Yes. Basically, the council has rules on addressing the council are that citizens to be heard is not provided as a forum for publicly announced or declared candidates for city public office, and they will not be allowed to speak as citizens to be heard. And Mr. Nelson has filed a lawsuit on this, and it's currently in court, and that's actually the better forum to deal with this. But the Open Meeting Act does not give anyone the right to address a public body during their meeting. The Attorney General has dealt with that issue. He was asked in 1998, does either the Open Meeting Act or the First Amendment require that public bodies such as city councils afford interested citizens an opportunity to present their views on matters being considered during the public body's open meeting? And the Attorney General said no, the Open Meeting Act does not give anyone the right to be heard at an open meeting. It only gives them the right to be present and view the workings of government at open meetings. And the Attorney General also said that the holdings of the U.S. Supreme Court make it clear that the First Amendment rights to speak do not require public bodies to afford citizens an opportunity to express their views on issues being considered by the public bodies. Now, when the public body, a legislative body, has provided a forum for citizens, then the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, has characterized that as a limited or non-public forum. And the public body can place limitations on subject matter and speaker identity, and the federal courts have found it permissible to exclude certain speakers from limited public forums. In fact, there's even a 1976 U.S. Supreme Court case where political candidates said the political candidates can be excluded from speaking, even though other members of the public are permitted to speak on other subjects. At the February 14th meeting, Mr. Nelson announced that he was running for mayor, and as of today, he still has a website that says he's running for mayor. So he is a candidate for city public office. So under the council's rules on addressing the council, he would not be allowed to speak on citizens to be heard.
Is there a difference between saying you're going to run for mayor and actually filing to run for mayor? I mean, no, it's 2
Can I ask
years
a
away.
question in here?
Hang on just a minute, someone's speaking.
If it has nothing to do with a public forum whatsoever,
Sarge,
it's
I
a
think-
concerned citizen,
Sarge,
why
Councilman-
couldn't I speak?
Councilman Shadid was in the middle of a question. Bear with us for a minute.
Well, Counselor, all I can say is my suit was directed at 3 of you. You brought the whole body in. You're going to earn your money because you're wrong, and I intend to prove it. I am not running for mayor. I put it in as a ploy. You all did exactly what I expected you to do. Earn your money.
Right. You are running for mayor. Here's your website.
Okay, we now have executive session.